How's my lighting? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Why my phone look like that? I might need to wipe it off. Doesn't matter. I'm multitasking anyway. Oh no. What did I do? Dun 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 dun. Greetings, greetings, greetings. Let's give honor to Source of the Creator for making this possible. The light is over here. Okay. I need to take a break from this anyway. How many I got? I'll just finish this later. Let me see. 1, 2, hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. What? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh. No, I'm just creating another book. And boy, that process is the focus, getting clarity of stuff. I was like, let me create this video because I came across something that was, oh my gosh, it was so amazing the way this sister broke this stuff down. And again, I always bring it back to myself and then, share with y'all my experiences or I just felt guided to share. That being said, I don't even know where to jump into. Let's give honor to Source, to the Creator, to the Most High for making this possible, whatever you subscribe to. Shout out to you for wherever you are in your journey, your experiences. Man, it is interesting. Okay, let me see. Is this saved? Yeah, it's saved. So let me exit out of this. Oh yeah, give gratitude to the ancestors known and unknown as well. For the highest good of all. Well, I can sit this too. Ooh. So, yeah. In this video, the sister was referencing women and their, just speaking about immaturity. I'm not going to make it at all about one particular person or gender or whatever, because I can speak for myself, but I can also reflect on the collective aspect, as I've mentioned before, about like the importance of like emotional security, emotional safety. Emotional safety has a lot to do with emotional maturity. That's one thing that she was pointing out. One thing she mentioned was like how the ego has never learned how to self-regulate. I was like, whoa. And I'm just reading off my notes, like, which again, emotional immaturity. And what has happened is like we have normalized immaturity or the inability to regulate emotions. And there was something else in there, like when you talk about building identity around it, it was also like how we have normalized and rewarded immaturity. And what I mean by that is like you're seeing people who walk around, or a collective aspect of people walking around with no sense of emotional maturity, meaning like if they're not, they react more rather than responding in a healthy way. One thing that was also mentioned is how maturity creates maturity creates stability, and I can honestly say that, like from experience. Like when I reflect on the upbringings of women who were not mature, who did not develop the balance between their feelings and logic, then it's she also the sister also mentioned what was so important. It's like a child that doesn't know how to sit with the discomfort of their feelings. Maturity forces you to do that. So when you look at the world, the people's inability to feel, this is why I always go back to the matriarch and our mothers, is that they haven't had the opportunity, and then that's also not something that's prioritized. That's why I always encourage to make space for yourself to sit with that discomfort. And when she mentioned how a child who wants to naturally be dependent on a mother or someone, she was referencing, women or men as well, women especially, like how in their inability to feel, it's like a child that looks for in that correction for stability to to self-soothe or to regulate the emotions. There's a collapse, and then that's why you see a child throw a temper tantrum or react, if you want to say that, in like a could be an aggressive way, or react or completely collapse of no, basically reflecting no sense of emotional stability or um, emotional identity, you know from that place of, like, how could I say this, like, being that, again, a lot of our mothers who haven't had empathy for themselves, or mothers never had empathy for them, or them not knowing the importance of how they didn't have mothers who matured or know how to regulate their emotions, again continue the pattern of that. So again, how that can show up in women and little boys and so forth, they, by them not having a dysregulated nervous system, or not knowing how to regulate the emotion in that moment, it will look completely different than it would be a son or a little girl, um, or a daughter. So she also made a very valid point about how you have most of people aging and not maturing. When I look at when I reference like the boomer generation, a lot of them now are aging. They're not maturing. And so their inability to feel, especially for the patriarchal, the distorted matriarchal also reflects the distorted patriarchal. So this is why you can see, like, um, in people's inability to mature past whatever state emotionally when they were a child, being, let's say, they never had discipline or correction, which is discipline, then what can happen is what she mentioned, like, we have created a world with people who avoid the responsibility around feeling, their immature state around um, them not wanting correction, or no one can correct them in their mind, in their body, whatever. No one can tell them what to do. But and that's where accountability comes in, which I've noticed, like, when you see not all women, but modern day women who don't accept correction, there's this rebuttal, or there's this defensiveness, because what feeling comes up, they don't acknowledge within self, they project it. And the same thing with men, they take this on, and this is where you don't have mutual respect. Because when you don't have someone who has, and that's one thing, again, how men are naturally, the first thing is respect for them. And when you don't have a society or environment um, that naturally ignores what they feel and don't stand in something, or don't develop some type of self-sufficiency, self-reliance, or self-respect, dignity, things that centered around morality or principles, or honoring that feminine principle, this then you see it displayed through wounded masculinity. Again, no sense of wanting correction, which again, that's just going through that flow but not having structure. So that structure, which is correction, which is discipline, which a child, there's a balance in life, the significance of what mother and father, that balance in life for a child. When you have most of women or most of society or people in certain demographics who have not had people there to correct them, they grow and they age, and now you're having people who are not mature because they built an identity around not feeling or wanting to feel, or what else? The ego, the wounded ego, or the ego being, because there's a healthy way of ego, but the ego, the wounded ego aspect wants to feel, um, receive this attention towards, it's all about me, or I don't have to do this. And I don't mean in a rebellious just aspect. It's more so like from a wounded place. Um, what else? That's why in certain moments where, with emotional immaturity, when someone wants to correct or mirror back correction, there is this defensiveness when it comes to accountability. And that's why people can feel the attack. But it's really just showing you, can I take responsibility for my actions, because your actions led you to where you are. And when I reflected on that in relationships, I start to mirror, like really reflect on all of women, meaning going back to the root aspect of my mother and so forth. Seeing that person who is aging but not maturing. Like, that is huge in today's society. When she mentioned how they reward emotional reactions, or they reward, immaturity, and then monetize it. But then when it comes to someone, how they're easily offended, someone who's easily offended and react gets more attention, like the instant gratification from that. Because maturity is delayed gratification, because you feel through the emotion, the delayed gratification from that, and then you're learning to sit with the discomfort. So again, at a childlike state, when you have people who are childlike still in their mind, like the immaturity aspect, they never have discipline, they're looking for that instant gratification, the instant being agreeable, and so forth. So now you're seeing in relationships or connections, whether you are married or not, you can see this very clearly now. And I'm telling you, I noticed it even with myself and even in relationships with people. So, and it's not so much of people's fault. It's so much it shows you how, what their upbringing was. Let's say for a woman who didn't have a mother, who didn't have a mother present. I've seen clearly how the inability for women to feel, and then they go into this performance, whether whatever they were brought up in, that performance could be through sexual deeds, that performance could be through trying to manipulate, or have a man want to subscribe to whatever narrative that they believe that is literally built off immaturity. They don't know, but built, which again, immaturity creates chaos, because in their inability to like regulate their emotions or to learn a self-identity, because emotions teach you about self first rather than other people. So a lot of what you can see people identity built around this is trying to make people or shape people into basically what reflects their inner world, what reflects them. And it's my way or no way type thing. And so she also mentioned how like being regulated gets ignored, and that's why immaturity in itself can create so much chaos. Because here you are having someone, let's say again, mature in a way of where like I had to learn the importance of what emotional safety was for me. So in that, I'm able to reflect and see what doesn't honor and what doesn't honor that same core value when it comes to emotional maturity or emotional safety. When I'm able to recognize that, I'm able to see like, okay, this person's inner child When I say childlike, it's like in their minds or in their beings, we're dealing with the fact of even how social media, like again, going back to, let's say a woman, I'm just using some women like who didn't have um, emotional safe environments, or a mother that was emotionally safe, or um, that was emotionally secure or mature. So in her inability to regulate these things or learn it for herself, she won't have an identity built around empathy for other women. Sometimes she can seek this validation or attention inadvertently through creating an identity around where no one likes her when it comes to women, and create an identity around that, which that is an immature way to approach it. Now, I'm not saying whatever reasons that women may not like other people, but when you look at the context or the collective aspect, we're dealing with, again, I've said before, emotionally, when you have dealt with emotionally unavailable or abusive people or an environment and so forth who don't have emotional empathy, then the opposite of that, the duality of that, is that people create an identity around what they haven't been fed, mentally, emotionally, and so forth. They naturally create an identity around it. It's just like someone who was, um, bullied. Sometimes they can either create a narrative around that, or they can try to protect themselves through substance abuse, through building muscles to protect themselves, and so forth. So, there's a whole nother topic around that. And let me see. So yeah, let me continue this. So what ends up happening is that you see people again create this identity around whatever they pretty much have experienced, or um, let's say again, if they didn't have the emotional security and so forth, unconsciously they can be living out these behavior patterns. Again, social media for once, it's like how again someone can develop this narrative around women don't like them or certain things like that, and that could be rooted in some type of wound, some type of fact of how they never grew up they never grew up around a woman or in the presence of women who were emotionally secure, who didn't have to prove themselves. So again, when you look at society, it's no different than when you see certain women, not all, certain women and or men, but women I'm using right now, to unconsciously seek the validation of a man. And this can, again, can reflect when you look at how emotions operate, how having empathy for self, when you don't have foundations built upon these things, from my perspective, this is exactly how I can see why certain relationships learn behavior patterns, unconscious patterns develop through relationships, attracting those very things, um, whether not just attracting that, but the opposite of that, to where what was familiar and then what was unfamiliar. So again, collectively, how this can play out, where again, you see social media more as like something that's monetizing the immaturity around people not wanting to grow up, not wanting to mature. So what you see a highlight on is how people are just aging and not wanting to expand their awareness, their consciousness, because emotions will lead you to change behavior. Emotions will guide you to the rage, to the things that are suppressed and repressed within yourself. Not to mention psychologically, when women are not given things to be able to mature past, some of them, mature past a lot of their behaviors reflecting childhood or whatever been repressed and suppressed, then you're going to see a lot of what they're seeking, whether they are conscious of it or not. It's not a way of, it's coming from an immature place, an insecure place, an unstable place. Because again, in that immaturity, you're going to create chaos whether you know it or not. And this goes for both. That's why I always highlight the matriarchal, because it's what you have enabled and supported. And when you haven't had an emotional supportive environment, society, people, and so forth, there's not going to be a highlight around you holding you accountable for your actions, for what you're doing, how much it has a ripple effect on everyone, and so forth. Especially if you're on a social media platform. And when I see, again, this is my perspective, when I see like a lot of stuff now, I'm recognizing the how people, like I said, it's no judgment, it's just how people present themselves. It says a lot about not just their age, like it says a lot about aging and then maturing. Like, haven't we got to this place? It's just like someone you know growing up in certain environments and they still dress a certain way. That says a lot about their internal compass. That says a lot about how they approach life, even their intentions, whether hidden or not. It shows a lot about their emotional state. It shows a lot about that. So I'm getting text messages and stuff, but so with that, what else was I getting into? Again, it can look, it's again, from my perspective, I'm not caring if people agree or not. When I see people on social media or certain platforms, it tells you, like, it shows you maturity within you, but it also just highlights naturally the immaturity in how someone is approaching life. And then they complain about it. Like one thing she mentioned is like, they complain about, you know, how they're getting treated or come to social media or come to certain things, but they don't ask themselves like, okay, even after these lessons, how are you going to respond rather than react from it? Because a lot of things show reaction rather than the maturity around, well, what's your approach? What's your lessons? What are you going to do differently? And so that's why, what else was on there? Hold on one second. Swear, when you create something, boy, golly, you want to call, interrupt, interject. So again, yeah, like I'm saying, like when you see the collective aspect of even how emotions, when you honor them, it really truly reflects your authenticity for who you are, because it's your self-expression. When you look at social media and so much things, when she mentioned the childlike aspect, it's not about fun. It's about the maturity. How when you see a lot of stuff is ruled by instant gratification rather than delayed gratification. A lot of where people's attention go shows the fact that they don't know how to sit with discomfort. They don't know how to sit with themselves. So that right there in itself, the inability to feel and acknowledge, will have you, those who walk a path of healing or those who walk a path of walking in authenticity and integrity, you have to, in that seclusion or isolation, whatever you do, you're learning to sit with that discomfort. And in that discomfort, you're not looking for validation. In that discomfort, it literally brings up what you've been, your learned behavior patterns, what has kept you in comfortability and so forth. So in that discipline, when you're going through a healing or when you're going through wanting to change, it will literally reflect back where you need correction or discipline to approach, rather than, it also revealing and bringing up, where it forces you to mature or to outgrow what and that's the thing about elevation or evolving. It's just like, again, when you see the world state or the collective, a lot of people haven't matured or not willing to. So this is why they seem stuck, or this is why they naturally in their life can create more chaos, and blame it on someone else rather than taking accountability for their role, their actions, or even accepting the correction they need to approach in their life. So, what else? And that's the thing about how a lot of the ego is being dissolved around what's happening in the world and that's how I had to learn. Like, again, I develop an identity around my inability to regulate my emotions, to honor that. Therefore, I kept attracting or kept continuing being immature, not wanting to grow up, not wanting to be responsible for my life, my actions, my own emotions, my own everything first, instead of pointing the finger. And that has been through the inability of a lot of our mothers and fathers or other people who are not mature. Just because they obtain things doesn't mean that they are mature. And that's why a lot of us can feel like we are almost not even older, because that's aging. It's more so we can see how we're more evolved or more mature, like in conversations where people don't know how to have a healthy dialogue. They want to raise their voice, they want to argue. Maturity will show you how I'm not responsible for their emotions. I'm responsible for how I respond, or even if I want to even deal with that, interact with that, and so forth. So in that's why I saw a narrative how people can react to the fact of how you respond to them in a healthy way because they're not used to it. And again, you'll see people group up around the person who like how they reward the immaturity around not seeing that person's role and actions, but immediately make you the bad guy or make you out to be like it's that person, rather than seeing the mature person in it. They see the immature person, and what that says about them is, again, it reflects them. And that says a lot, even with the fact of, again, going back to the matriarchal. A lot of you dealt with, as you walk away and go no contact with a mother or matriarchal figure. When you look at the matriarchal, again, the immature aspect of how many women mothers and fathers mothers know how to take accountability for what they've said, what they've done. How many are still looking for people to save them, looking for that validation, that gratification, that acceptance, rather than within themselves? How many of them enable their sons but push out their daughters because they don't want to take their role? And this is where that smothering comes in. So that son can validate or reassure or almost give them gratification for their wrongdoing. See, correction, they don't want correction. So that's why walking away or removing self shows maturity. That's, of course, in a world who has not matured beyond certain emotions because they repress it or suppress it, or not going to look to that unless, until a world start to realize, like in the shift of a lot of things, as we take back our power and step into our power and realize, like, what can I do differently? How could I approach this? Not blaming. Where's the accountability on my part? So, again, I've seen it from a man's perspective of how, again, seeing when I look at the old family dynamic that I grew up in, immaturity. How people will clap for people, the dysfunctionality in it, rather than someone who's trying to mature past and honor what's really happening. Like when you get away from people, you learn to regulate. You start to see what's happening, the discomfort in your body, in your mental state, your emotional and spiritual and so forth. You start to realize, like, whoa. Because of the ego or the body has not regulated what has happened, that chaos is building up through that repression, through that repress and suppressing continuously.
So again, that's why a lot of us trying to approach elders or trying to approach people, they have not matured. They're not willing to go within. They're not willing to feel. So they avoid it. So in that avoidance only creates more conflict within themselves. So they don't want conflict resolution. They don't want to find a solution. They want to continue to mask. And this is what you've seen through a lot of generations. And so this is why people are afraid to come together. This is why people are so childlike still. This is why they people please. I'll probably make a part 2 to this, but yeah. So, y'all take care of yourself. Peace and blessings. Shalom.